Hello and welcome. My name is Tom. This is the Enthusiasm Project, Season 5, Episode 17, also Series Episode 101, Dalmatians. Okay, today we've got a lot to talk about, and I wanted to start off by saying thank you to everybody who sent me all kinds of super nice stuff over the past week for the 100th episode, super extravaganza spectacular, and that was really like a fun milestone that did not hit me until we were actually recording it, and it's really cool. Like, milestones like that are pretty awesome, and I'm just flattered and much appreciative of all of the support and everything that came out from there. So before we jump into the main topics that we're going to talk about today, did want to talk about what I'm talking into, which would be the microphone that I'm using today. I have been watching a number of videos and streams this week where people have just been sounding great and looking cool on the old PodMic. And so this week I wanted to make sure to just go back to basics and just PodMic, Rodecaster, that super simple setup. And I just, the PodMic is really, really fun. So that's what I'm using today, is just the good old PodMic into the Rodecaster. And gosh, the PodMic is such a strange microphone to me. It was like the first quote unquote serious microphone that I bought. I got the Rodecaster, and then I needed a good XLR mic, and the PodMic was basically made for the Rodecaster, so I got the PodMic. And I just, that probably biased me towards it a lot because it's built really well. I liked the way that it sounded. It sounded better than anything else I had used up until that point. But the more that I've gotten experience with other microphones over the years and things, the PodMic has become such an interesting microphone to me because it has such a specific character to its sound. And some people like that and some people don't. And some people sound good on it and some people don't. So it does kind of make it a tough mic to just universally recommend. When someone's like, hey, what's a good microphone? It's like, well, the PodMic's cool if you have a specific voice that it's going to work with and you like the way that it sounds. But if you don't have those things, then you won't like it and you might be disappointed by it. Fortunately for me, it worked out and I really like it. And gosh, when whatever it is, the stars align and someone has like a voice that just suits the PodMic or whatever it might be, it sounds so good on it's just so nice. So anyway, that's what I'm using today. Just the good old PodMic and everything. And I also I've gotten a few questions, and now that it's been well over a week, I wanted to give a quick update on my new computer because people are curious about these computers, and I haven't done a full-on review yet. When I got the M1 Max MacBook Pro, that's a mouthful, I did a first impressions video, which I wasn't even planning to make. I just got so excited about the computer. I specifically actually was not going to make a first impressions video because I thought there were already so many of them. And as exciting as the new computers are, it's a MacBook. Like you know what it looks like. They all kind of look the same. We know the performance is pretty good. How many people do you need telling you that wow, MagSafe is back and there's a notch in the screen and also an SD card port and the computer's fast. Okay, we get it. The thing is, though, it was so good, and as I was setting it up, I got so excited about it that I just needed to tell people, and there's only so many times I can tell Heather about this computer is cool. So that was where YouTube came into play, and I also wanted a video I could edit on the computer to try it out right away. So I do have my first impressions video, which all of those impressions, have just been confirmed. So I'm going to work on a long-term review that'll, I don't know, after I've had it 4 to 6 weeks or more and kind of dives into that stuff a little bit more. But in the meantime, it has been really, really good. I've been making notes about it that I will use in the review, but I'm happy to spoil that stuff here for you if you're listening and you're curious about the computers or whatever, you're just kind of curious about it. So far, I do have the 14-inch M1 Max with 32 gigabytes of RAM, it's a 10-core CPU and the 24-core GPU. Yeah, I don't know. That's the reason I'm saying I don't know is because I keep getting questions where people are like, why did you get 32-core GPU instead of 24? And I'm like, I don't know. I got the computer that I thought would be good for me and that it was kind of within my budget. That's my answer. And then there's another weird thing too that's been popping up where people have been, which I do need to say though, the feedback on my first impression video has been like the most positive computer related feedback I've ever gotten on my channel. Usually if I make a video about computers, I get a bunch of people telling me I don't know anything about what I'm talking about and how dumb I am and all that. For some reason, this one, it's like 99.9% just people being awesome. And that makes me so happy. But one of the things that has popped up is if you really wanted like the powerful one, why didn't you get the 16-inch, 16-inch? And it's like, because it's bigger and I didn't want, like I personally didn't want the bigger computer. I had a 16-inch computer and the screen size was amazing, but the portability was like, for me, right on the edge of I could do it. I did a lot of traveling with my 16-inch, but it was always a little like just on the cusp of being unwieldy to me. And so many bags, are made to accommodate like a 13, 14-inch size computer, not a 16-inch. And so there's like, it was always hard to figure out where I was going to put it or if I needed to carry a bigger bag or like where it was just, I just, for me, the 14-inch is like the perfect size. And I really like it. And finally, I can live my dream. I know this would have been possible on previous MacBooks, but I never got to the point where I could do this. I'm living my dream now where when I want to use an external display, I can use one Thunderbolt 3 cable connected to the display, to the computer, and that's it. And then the computer powers the display and also gets charged by the display so it never runs out of battery, which is very cool. I didn't know that would happen or not because the M1 Max comes with the higher wattage power adapter. And so I was wondering if my computer display, which I think is only rated at like 60 watts or 67 or something, if it was going to actually be able to charge the computer or if it would just sort of help it to drain more slowly. But it stays fully charged even when I'm like powering through Final Cut and everything. So that is super cool. And I guess the thing that really makes that stand out, even though that's something you could have been doing for a while with MacBooks, the thing that makes it stand out now is the fact that the ports are just built into the computer, so many of them, so you don't have to have like dongles and adapters and a hub and all those things. Like I can just have the computer, one cable, and I've got a keyboard and a mouse and it does everything I need. So that's really, really cool. But just a couple other notes though that I've had with it. So these are in no particular order. They're just notes that I'm making. The fans. A lot of people have been asking about the fans. They've been wondering if the 14-inch is noisy, and they've heard that it's noisy. So far, in like the 10 days that I've had it or so, mine has not been noisy at all. I have heard the fans actually turn on, though, once, maybe twice. One time questionably, but one time definitely. And the fans came on after I had imported 6 layers of 4K footage into Final Cut Pro and then added some color corrections, and the computer was like processing and rendering all of that new footage. It wasn't just 6 layers, but it was also like, how long was it? It must have been, I think it was like 40 something minutes of 6K footage. So it was pretty long, big files, multiple layers of them with adjustments added. And then when the computer went to like render that and process it, the fans did turn on. They were definitely audible, but nowhere near as bad as the 16-inch Intel MacBook was. They were just kind of, normal sounding computer fans. And it did start to get warm in the middle of the keyboard right above where the actual chip is on the motherboard, because I watched the iFixit teardown where you could see where the M1 chip is actually located. And that was where it started to get warm. Not like hot or unusable, but, oh, wow, the keyboard is warm here. And then as soon as it was done processing the footage, the fans turned off and the computer cooled down, and that was it. The weird thing about that, though, is it's not done it since, because I've imported other batches of footage. I've done the same workflow, and the fans haven't kicked on or made any noise since. So I don't know why that one time it did, but that was it. And to me, that's fine, because it makes sense that the computer's going to need to be doing a lot of processing in a task like that, and it's going to be generating heat, and it's going to need to be cooled, and it stopped making noise as soon as it could. And that didn't interfere with anything. It has not turned on when the fans have not turned on when I've been using like Ecamm or Zoom or any of that kind of stuff. So during any sort of streams or calls or any of the really important things where having a noisy computer would be a distraction, it has not turned on, which is great, because going back to my Intel MacBook, as soon as I would even like open up Ecamm or Zoom without even running a call, the fans would kick in and go crazy. And that does not happen now. So that's pretty good. The battery life has been great for me. I know people are saying like, well, the M1 Max takes more battery power, so the battery life's not as good. And I guess maybe it could be that I'm skewed in what I'm comparing it to, because my 13-inch MacBook from 2013 is, like the battery still works on it, but you're going to get a couple hours on that. It drains pretty quickly at this point. And the 16-inch MacBook that I had, the battery life was just not great on it. It drained pretty darn quickly. You get like a couple hours of heavy use, and that was about it. I haven't done like full-on timed tests, but there have been times where I've been working for a long time on like video editing stuff. But I've been, saving things, transferring files, replying to stuff, like just doing like administrative work for what feels like a long time, like an hour or more, and it goes down 0 to 1%, like, it goes from 100% charge to 99% or something. So that's pretty good. And when I've been editing on Final Cut and doing more intensive tasks or Photoshop or whatever on battery power, it seems like it doesn't drain very fast. I've never had it. I think the lowest the battery's gone so far is into the 40s, and I should probably actually let it drain, but I haven't done that yet. So far it's been pretty darn good. And it's really fast. I did export a 22-minute 4K Final Cut project in 9 minutes and 33 seconds, which is pretty darn good. I've been playing around with Blender a little bit as I'm trying to learn Blender, and it renders so much better than the Mac Mini does. The weird thing so far, and I need to look into like what this codec is, the footage that the 14-inch hates the most, that it does not work well with, is the footage from my original DJI Mavic drone, the one from 2017. It works with it, but it really doesn't like that footage. That's the one type of footage that will like clog it and slow it down a little bit, and has to like process it. It must be some, that's 4K footage from 5 years ago. So there must be a weird codec happening that's just sort of outdated or not compatible. But that's the one thing so far where it's like, oh, maybe I don't want to use footage from this drone too much on there. But otherwise, I mean, gosh, the thing has just been absolutely fantastic, even though the fans have been relatively silent. But speaking of DJI, let's transition into our next topic here. That almost sounds like it was done on purpose, and it actually wasn't, because speaking of DJI drones, at the moment, I'm recording this on Friday. So if you're listening to it when it comes out on Monday, it's a few days ago. Friday, late Thursday night, early Friday morning is when all of the DJI Mavic 3 videos have dropped. So DJI has just been relentless the past few weeks with new product releases. And it's like, I think every week they've had a wave of releases for new stuff. And I think it was, and then back in September, they did the Osmo. They've had a lot of new products. Like they've refreshed a huge chunk of their product lineup, which makes sense, like going into the holiday season and all that. Super cool. Mavic 3 looks amazing. Footage looks great. You can even get like low light shots, use a drone at night and get things that are usable. That's very, very cool. However, I'm pretty mad at DJI, and I'll just be very honest with this. And it goes back to what we talked about a couple weeks ago. But at this point, I was kind of holding out to go like, okay, let's see how they handle these upcoming things. And they did exactly what I expected, which was nothing. And it bothers me. So I'm going to put them on blast again, since now I have like actual, like I just have more evidence to back up what I'm saying. Basically, for these 3 giant product releases, which is the Ronin 4D, very expensive cinema camera, totally new product category in its own way, very new thing. You have the Osmo Action, no, not the Osmo, it's just the Action 2, which is a totally like new form factor for their action camera. And then you have the Mavic 3, both the regular version and the Cine version. The regular version, I believe they're gearing as more of a consumer product, and the Cine version is obviously a more professional product. And considering it costs twice as much, you can kind of, $6,000 versus $2,500-ish around there. Yeah, so those are big products. They're good products. I will preface this with saying that on the product side of things, I really like DJI stuff. I think they're great at what they do. I think they're so good at innovating, at making stuff useful, every time something is updated, it feels like it was updated based on actual use experiences and use case. It's not just sort of a random like, well, we needed to update something, so we put this button over here, or we changed the color. Like every time you get a new version of a DJI product, it feels better than the one before, and it works better, and it's easier to use, and there's these little changes, everything from the way batteries charge to the way a control might work or something. It just like everything just gets refined a little bit more, and I don't know of any other companies that have done that as well and as consistently for as long as DJI has. That's probably the last nice thing I'll be saying about them today. And I feel bad about that because I mean, I've never worked with DJI personally, but I did have someone from their company reach out to me last summer, and we did a call and talked, and I ended up not doing the project. They were interested in doing a gimbal comparison, which sounded really fun, but I was just like, I don't really talk about gimbals that much on my channel. Like I have the Ronin S that I bought when it came out a few years ago, and that's my gimbal that I use. And I know it's like kind of clunky compared to the newer ones, but it still works. And I don't use gimbals terribly often. So it more than meets the needs for me. And I still have a lot of fun with it. And, you know, I don't talk about gimbals a lot on my channel. So I thought it would be, I told them I thought it would be weird if suddenly I was like, hey, here's a gimbal thing. And also like it's sponsored by, it just, you know, it didn't fit. And they were totally cool about that, totally understanding about that. Really, really nice. Like it was sort of like we just had the conversation to talk about a potential project, but then also just sort of get to know each other. And I had a great time. So my limited contact with people working at DJI, the people I talked to were fantastic. And that's what I've heard from everybody else I know who has worked with them, is that they're a very easy company to work with. Maybe I'm saying a lot more nice things than I said I would, but they're a very easy company to work with, and they're very in tune with how to work with creators, meaning that they don't try to control what the creator does. They're very good at like, yeah, here's the product. Sometimes they pay creators, sometimes they don't, I guess, depending on the specific deal and, you know, whatever those conditions might be. But for the most part, then they're like, here's the thing. Maybe here's a few points to touch on, like this specific feature or that specific feature. And otherwise, just go make a fun video. You know, we trust your judgment. Like we're coming to you because you are the person who has built up an audience around this. You know what you're doing. We just want to be a part of that. And that's how companies should approach working with creators. You shouldn't try to hijack somebody's creative process or their audience just because, you know, you're stuck in an old school media way of doing things. And that's great. The problem, and as you see going through any of the releases of the recent DJI products, is it is the same creators pretty much for every product. The Ronin 4D being like the most niche and most expensive of the products had the fewest people doing it. The Action 2 being the least expensive and probably most accessible of the products had the most. Like embargo videos is pretty much what I'm talking about, or people who were given the product pre-release. And the Mavic is somewhere kind of in the middle. And it's a lot of the same people, a lot of people who are absolutely great. So I'm not knocking them in any way. But amongst all of those videos and all of those releases, there are 2 female creators, and that's it. And I don't mean every time, like, you know, oh, the Ronin 40 came out, there's 2 female creators. The Osmo Action or the Action 2 came out, there's 2. No. In all of them combined, there are 2 videos from female creators. And it's iJustine did the Mavic 3, and her sister Jenna did the Action 2. So which both of them are great, by the way, and they're great. I have nothing negative to say about about iJustine or Jenna as creators. They're awesome, and I look up to them a lot. But it's also like, you know, one of them has many, many millions, and the other one has just about 1 million of subscribers. So they're in that different tier of creator, of person to work with, influencer, whatever you want to call it. And that's it. That's the only female creators who were included in any of those product things. And as we talked about a few weeks ago, of course, we don't know the details. Maybe they sent out products to other female creators and they just didn't make a video or something, but I kind of fail to see that that's like a really big coincidence to happen so many times, so consistently, and not just with this batch of product releases, but for going back years now, the exact same thing. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago, so we don't need to rehash the whole thing, but it is really bothering me. And I'm not even then going into the fact that basically everybody who was included in these is a white person, with the exception of like a few Asian people, and that's it. There's nobody with like darker skin tone or anything being included with any of this stuff. And I truly don't think that that's intentional or that's malicious. So I'm not like saying that DJI is trying to exclude women or people of color or whatever, but they're definitely not making an active effort to include them. And at this point, it should be pretty easy for them to look around and go like, wow, our lineup has kind of been the same for a while. Maybe we should bring in some new faces and some new perspectives and things. And they're just not doing that for some reason. I don't know what that would be. And that bothers me. And I'm just going to say it again, that it bothers me. And I think that that's ridiculous and it's disappointing. And I'm just saying it so that maybe somebody else who feels the same way might say it too. I know, like, I posted a thing on Twitter about it this morning and nobody cared because of course, why wouldn't they? But, or why would they? I mean, but I just kind of feel like it's not that I don't want to share every political opinion I have, every idea like that. But at this point, it feels really just disappointing. And it feels like a company with those resources and that reach could do so much better and could have such a positive impact in this world of, content creation and diversity amongst content creators, which are influential people among like other up and coming creators. I just think of people who are interested in this stuff and they just see a group of white guys and I guess a couple Asian guys and two girls talking about it. And there's a lot of people in the world who are never at this point able to see somebody who looks at least kind of like them representing the stuff that they're interested in. And that sucks. And I figure if I just keep saying something about it, then maybe other people will keep saying something about it. And then maybe at some point, somebody might somewhere consider doing something about it, possibly one day, maybe. I don't know. So it's disappointing. And it's definitely like, as much as I like DJI products, I'll be honest, it's like, I ain't buying a new one anytime soon. I like the ones that I have. I use them. It's not like I'm going to get rid of my drone. I don't know who else would make like a better drone than DJI, at least, that I could fly. But I'm happy to just sort of like not invest any more money in their stuff for a while until they do something better with this, because it just sucks. And going back to, I've talked about this before, but teaching students and seeing the impact that just a positive influence could have on a student was a big deal. And that could come from anywhere. But seeing just sort of the immediate connection that students would have to someone who kind of looked a little more like them or could relate to them in a different way, like had the same cultural experience or whatever, it really was different. And it's not that it's the only way to like connect or make a difference or do anything, but the world's a really big place. There are a lot of people out there, and there's no reason not to just include a little bit of diversity among that. And I know I say that from the privileged position of just being, another white guy who's into cameras and stuff. But it's also like, that's where I feel uncomfortable talking about it, because maybe, it might be more impactful to hear from like female creators criticizing DJI for no female creators. But I don't know, if I feel like there's a problem and I don't see a ton of conversation about it at this point, I feel like I should say something then, because otherwise I'm just sort of enabling the problem. So anyway, I'm interested to know if you have any thoughts about that, or how you feel about that, or whatever, regardless of of your skin color or gender or anything. It's just like, geez, can you just be a little representative and show people that, it doesn't just have to be a white dude who's into like cameras and filmmaking and stuff. Anyway, So that's a thing that's popped up, and I wanted to talk about that just because it's really, really, really been bothering me. But the main meat of this meal of a podcast, so we've gone through the appetizers and some of the side dishes, and now to get to the main entree, actually has to do with something a little bit different, but I did mention teaching, and it is so heavily related to stuff that I've learned while teaching. I guess because I haven't been working in the classroom for a while now, I keep thinking back to stuff, and one of the things I keep thinking on is how when you're a teacher, you get to just basically be doing like I don't know, social experiments on groups of people constantly and seeing what the results are. And I don't mean social experiment like it's a prank, bro. I mean like literally just seeing how people react to things, for better or worse. And it's a very interesting part of that job, because you sort of like can formulate a hypothesis, do an experiment, and get data like almost immediately. And it's very, very fascinating to me. And after 10 years, 11 years of doing that, I feel like there's a lot of important things that I learned, and simple stuff too. Like when I was teaching broadcast, my broadcast class was the first period of the day, but the actual broadcast that was streamed live was done at the beginning of the second period of the day. And so my broadcast students would stay, the ones who were working on the show at least, would stay into the start of the second period, do the show, and then go to their second class a little late. During that passing period, which was like 6 or 7 minutes between those classes, the stream would be up and running. Teachers should have been playing it in their classroom, and we basically just had like a countdown screen that was playing some music. We didn't care if it was royalty free or copyrighted; it didn't matter for that. That was kind of a fun thing that like students like to do, like to like be the DJ for the passing period. And there was one day I remember we didn't have a student to like be the DJ and do anything, and I just put on the like lo-fi beats to study to, the anime girl who's like writing and doing her homework for 6 years. I just put that on, and there was a class that was coming in while it was sort of chaos because I had students in the broadcast studio doing the broadcast, but I also had a new class coming in for that second class period, which was a freshman class. And freshmen, especially at the beginning of the year, having just come out of middle school, were so insane and just so rowdy and so ridiculous. Even the good ones are just maniacs. And it was strange because this day, it was just like a random Tuesday or Wednesday or something. The freshman class came in and they were so calm and so quiet, and like they followed directions more easily than normal. They were like, it was like such a pleasant day. And the only thing I could think of was, did it have something to do with the lo-fi music that was like quietly playing when they walked in the room? Did that like set the tone for something? And it was sort of interesting because whenever we would play music, you could go into the hallway during the passing period and you could hear it coming from all the different classrooms who were going to watch the broadcast. And so then a couple of my broadcast students, who were a lot of like juniors and seniors, I told them about that, and we started doing these little experiments where some days we would play really energetic music and we would kind of see like, do the hallways seem more like energetic, chaotic? And then other days we'd play really mellow stuff, and do things seem more mellow? And the answer was yes on all fronts. I think we did death metal one day. People didn't like that as much, but we just really wanted to see what the difference would be. And it was a crazy thing where we really learned that just by having like the really, really chill lo-fi music in the background as students were coming into class, it like set up not even just my class, but other classes that they were walking into and listening to this. It set them up to be in a more like laid back, mellow state of mind, which really kind of made the classes better. That was like a really fun experiment. I know it's not super scientific, but that was a really fun one that we learned a lot from. And so things like that, you know, I remember when I started teaching English, one of the things I learned, I spent a lot of time with ninth graders and freshmen, especially when you're starting out, because they're the hardest grade to teach. And so when you're a new teacher, you're always going to get the most difficult stuff. And so my very first year as a contracted teacher, I taught yearbook. I taught English for Spanish speakers, like even though I don't speak Spanish. So it was an English class for students who don't natively speak English and who are not very proficient in English yet. And then I taught several periods of what was called strategic reading, which had no curriculum and and no resources, and was pitched to me when I got hired as, yeah, these are kids that are basically about to drop out, and we just need you to make them like reading. But also they like can't read. Okay. Cool. But it ended up, those classes, gosh, they were very rough at the beginning. By the end of the year, like we were all so close because we'd all just had to figure it out. And, I could sort of go off their interests, because there was no curriculum. I really struggled to reach around and like find class sets of books and novels that were interesting and, not too difficult to read, and it wouldn't be torturous. And that was hard to do. And you're like, hey, where can I get 40 something copies of one book that meets all those requirements? But anyway, we did it. And then sometimes we would talk about, articles or just something that's interesting or whatever it might be. I think those classes ended up being pretty successful. But one of the things I learned going into that was just the adolescent brain, especially when you're talking about 13, 14 years old. And I don't know, honestly, if this only applies to adolescents or if this goes to just human beings in general, because I feel like I relate to this. But specifically, there was research that showed that even under ideal circumstances, someone who's, 13 to 14 years old or around that age cannot focus on one task or one thing for more than about 11 minutes. That's about it. So if you have a 50 or 90 minute class period or however long they might be, and you're saying that the students can only really focus on something for 11 minutes at a time, what that means as the teacher is you need to like build in sort of these like resets. And teacher school will give you very cheesy stuff like, okay, everybody stand up and now like just do some stupid activity that is embarrassing and terrible. But what you can do as a teacher is you can just be aware of that, and you can go through your content and you can deliver your lessons and you can do all that. And then suddenly you can come across the line and be like, oh, this reminds me of something that happened, when I was a kid. And then you tell a goofy story or you tell a goofy joke or you sort of like, you really do kind of become a performer at a certain point, but you do something every 10 to 11 minutes that's just sort of maybe a minute or two of like distraction or a tangent or something that's kind of irrelevant, and and then it resets everything, and then kids can focus again for another 10 minutes. In doing that, you become very in tune to what a group is feeling as a whole, which is a very strange thing. I'm sure there's been like research studies into this, but I don't know about it. But like, for lack of a better term, group vibes, like what a group of people, there's something like individuals each have their own, when someone comes in, it just sort of seems like, wow, they really boosted the mood in the room or they lowered the mood in the room. And that's just an individual. But a group of people like almost take on a singular energy, I guess. That sounds very new wave, but it really makes sense. And you can get the feeling of when you're teaching, you can feel when like, hey, this group is really like paying attention to what's happening. Doesn't mean every student is 100% like locked onto every word you're saying, but this group is really on board, or this group really seems stressed out. This group seems distracted. This group seems angry, happy, whatever, is very much a real thing. And through teaching, I just sort of like developed that skill of being able to understand that. So that's when like, hey, we need to take a break. Hey, we need to shift gears. Or, hey, this is really working, so I'm going to just keep going and not change anything at the moment. It affected what assignments I gave, what projects we did, how the classrooms were arranged, all that kind of stuff was based on just sort of like feelings you could get. And I'm sure if you know a teacher or you are a teacher, especially if they teach like high school where they have different class periods, you'll hear them say general statements about their specific classes. Like, my fourth period class is really good. My second period class is crazy. My sixth period is, this or that, the other thing. And it sounds weird to go like, okay, this is a class of, in my case, 40 to 50 students. It's weird to say like, that class is crazy, because obviously every one of those students is not doing something crazy, but it has to do with that group feeling. And there were just times, and it's strange because it had nothing necessarily to even do with the content, because sometimes it would be like, here's something that we've done in the past that I know works really well and that everyone really likes, and now it's just not landing. It's just not connecting. Here's something that I did with first period that, third period, it's not connecting with in the same way, or they're not feeling it. Like, it's very strange. It's very hard to put into words, but you just start feeling what other groups are feeling. And the reason I bring that up is because you can sort of sense trends. And what I became interested in was, like, if I had a group of students that suddenly got really interested in something. So it could have been anything from like visual effects. I remember one year I had some students who just sort of seemed like they were playing around with bootleg After Effects. And it was like, let's get like legitimate licensed After Effects in here. And we did that. And a big chunk of that school year was like people getting really excited about learning basic effects and basic, visual special effects and stuff like that, and being really excited about it. And then the next year, some of those same people not into that at all anymore. And obviously, like, interests change and perspectives change and everything. But it's just like, it's this idea of, I almost think of it as, if you think of like your favorite food or a favorite song, a favorite movie, and you're thinking like, wow, I'll never get tired of eating this or listening to this or watching this. And then suddenly you find yourself going like, maybe I don't need to listen to that song right now. Maybe I'm not in the mood for that meal again right now. Stuff just kind of changes, and groups have that. And what I'm interested in is not just trying to adapt to like what the group wanted next or what they needed next, but was kind of figuring out the whys behind these transitions and these changes that I noticed. And the reason I'm bringing that up right now is not totally unrelated to what we're talking about, but it's because of sort of a trend, a group, a feeling that's in the zeitgeist, is that the right word, of content creators and creation. And it has to do with like the pendulum swinging from hustle culture to, I don't know what you would want to call it, self-care culture, and everything that's in between. And for the most part, when it comes to issues that have one side or the other side, I'm pretty much always the person who's like, it's a little bit of both. For the most part, there are obviously things in life where it is a clear black or white, this is bad, this is good kind of thing. But speaking broadly, speaking generally, I'm typically that person. And it's always frustrating because sometimes people want you to just give a straight opinion, or they want you to take a side. And it's a lot less exciting and a lot more nuanced to talk about like all the gray area in between the black and the white. But that's really where I think a lot of the like truth of the matter lies much of the time. And the reason I bring this up is just thinking back on my own YouTube experience. So being a fan and a viewer of YouTube for many years, I had no idea really what went into the behind the scenes. I just sort of imagined, I remember watching people 2011, 2012 around there and just thinking like, wow, it's really cool that these people are spending their free time making videos. That's awesome. And then I started my channel in 2017, kind of thinking similarly, and then also being influenced by people who were really on that like hustle culture mindset, which we've talked about many times before on the podcast. But that idea of like, just do more, you only need 4 hours of sleep a night, just keep making more, doing more, just more of everything. And you should be able to excel at your job and be a beast at your job. And you should be able to monetize every hobby and have a side hustle and be a great partner and be a great parent and be at the gym every day. And you should just be like firing on all cylinders all the time, no matter what. And if you're not willing to do that, you just don't have enough like grit, or you're just not trying enough. And that was very unhealthy and very crazy. And it was a weird thing though that caught me by surprise, because working with high school students for so long, I did preach the idea of like working hard, and hard work is important, and a strong work ethic is important. And then I sort of felt like, well, maybe I've been approaching this wrong, and this is actually a bad thing to praise. And I think it's, again, somewhere in the middle. But that is also, not long after that was when all those discussions about like creator burnout started popping up, and taking care of yourself and reducing stress and all those sorts of things, which was good. I think that's a very good, healthy thing to have happen. And now I feel we're kind of on that end of it, where it's like, it feels almost wrong to want to push yourself or to encourage someone to push themselves to do something. And I don't think that that's good either. I think that I am speaking very generally here, but I think that it is important to push yourself, and I think that it is important to work hard. I think the key is knowing why you're doing those things, what the intention is, what you want the outcome to be, how long you plan to do that. If you're just like, I'm going to work my butt off and have this insane schedule forever, that's not sustainable. But if you have a specific goal, if you have a purpose, I think it can be a good thing. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because recently, especially within the Just Create More community that Heather and I started last summer, we've had a lot of discussions about this. And I think there's very clear instances when someone needs to take a break because they're burnt out. We've had people talk about, having panic attacks and feeling just completely overwhelmed and stressed, or their relationships start suffering, or they start, even personally, there've been times in the past where I started getting physically sick from stress and exhaustion and things. Those are very important signs to be aware of, and monitoring yourself to see where you're at. And when you hit that point and you decide that you need to take a break or focus on taking care of yourself, that's a very important thing to do. Like, taking care of your own mental, emotional, and physical well-being is or should be the top priority. And then everything else can happen once you're taken care of. So I'm in no way advocating that someone pushes themselves to an unhealthy level. I don't think that's a good thing at all. But what I have noticed is that it seems like it has gotten to a point, at least in some of the discussions that I've been a part of and that I've sort of witnessed or overheard, it sort of seems like we've hit a point for a lot of content creators where as soon as there's like any sort of friction or a hurdle, that is a sign to stop. Like, this became difficult, it's stressful, I need to take care of myself, I can't burn myself out. And maybe people are traumatized or scared from things that happened in the past, which completely makes sense. But also, I think that's dangerous in and of itself, because I feel like I've known people who, say, hey, okay, I'm going to make a YouTube channel and make videos. And then as soon as it starts to get a little difficult, they're like, oh, it's difficult, I need to take a break, I need to disconnect. And then a year later, they're like, oh, I've been doing this for a year and I'm not getting the results that I want. I haven't gotten to where I want to go. And it's like, yeah, but you've been doing this for a year, quote unquote, but you also kind of stopped like 6 times for 8 months. Like, you really haven't been putting in that time that you say you have been. And if you literally can't for your own well-being, that's fine. But if it's just kind of like, if what you're fighting against is the friction you feel when you're stepping outside of your comfort zone, or you're leveling up a skill set, or you're doing something different, which, that change and that transformation is always a little bit painful. It's like going to the gym. If your muscles are never sore when you go to the gym, it probably means you're not growing very much. You're not like actually building strength or muscle. You're not really doing anything. You kind of need to be sore, but you also don't want to go to the point where you're like debilitated or injured, right? So it's this balance of doing what's right for you. And it's going to be different for everybody. A 21-year-old college student is going to have a different tolerance, a different capability, different whatever for working at something like, building a YouTube channel versus a, person in their late 30s, early 40s who has a spouse and a few kids and a career and all this stuff, and they're trying to balance it while also building something like a YouTube channel. So it's different for everybody. It doesn't mean just because one person can put X amount of hours into their thing and the other person should also be able to do that, because it just doesn't translate that way. It means that you need to work really hard to calibrate your gauge on when you're feeling, whatever that point is where you feel like it is dangerous and it's exhausting, and now you're having very negative effects on other parts of your life. You want to make sure the gauge never gets to that point. But you also don't want the needle to just be flat and never moving at all, because then you're not going to be doing anything. And if your goal is to build something, you do kind of need to push yourself a little bit. And another example of this, which was so surprising to me, and this, I hope this comes across okay, but it's a very real thing that I experienced. So let's talk about college for a second. I went to college. I like college. I think college is great if you have a purpose, if you're going for a specific reason. And especially if you can find a way to make it financially somewhat accessible, where maybe you get scholarships, maybe you don't go to an expensive school, maybe you take out a minimal amount of loans, whatever that might be. You know, it's again different for everybody, but I think college is incredibly valuable if you have a purpose for it. I don't think it's something that everybody should just do. I don't think it's for everybody. And I don't think if you're just like, well, I don't know what I should do, I should just go to college because that's what I should do. And then you go into a massive amount of debt to get a degree that you're not going to use, that you're not really passionate about. I don't think that's super helpful either. As a teacher for students who are graduating around 18 years old, I kind of told them the same thing. Like, it's okay not to go to college as long as you have a goal and you're doing something, not that you're not just hanging out, like as long as you're working at something or exploring something, then it's okay not to go to college. If you go to college, you should have a reason. You want to get this degree or explore this thing. And if you didn't know what to do, I always just recommended my students go to community college, because at least here in the US, community college is relatively affordable, if not free in some cases, depending on like your residency, your income, all that kind of stuff. But even if it's not free, it's very affordable. You can put yourself through community college by working a part-time job. It's totally possible. It might take a number of years to get through community college, but by the time you're done, you can either get like an associate's degree or at least enough credits to transfer to then a 4-year university for your remaining 2 years. And sometimes that first couple years of community college is a great thing to like help you figure out what you want to do, what you want to get a degree in. And other times, even if it's not, and you just do those first couple years, and then you're like, I don't know, I'm going to go do something else. You still have that experience. You still learn stuff. You've still grown as a person. And academically, you're at a point where if something changes in the future and you decide you want to go to school, you don't have to start from the very beginning. You can usually just start transferring into a 4-year university for your upper division coursework. So, if you decide you want to, I don't know, we'll do teaching as an example. You want to get an English degree. If you don't have any degree right now in any education and you decide you want to be an English teacher, you have to go then take your basic, freshman level classes, which is going to be a lot of like, here's a math class and here's a world history class and here's this, and you're not even going to get to your degree stuff till at least your 3rd year probably. But if you do the few years at community college and then go off and explore other things, and then you get the idea where you're like, hey, yeah, now I want to get an English degree, you can just jump straight into upper division coursework for your degree specifically. So I think that's really smart and practical. But the reason I bring this up is because, I worked very hard through college. I had some friends who didn't. They either didn't go or they didn't work hard, which was fine. Like I never judged anyone I knew for not going to college. But when I was done with college and then I got my first like career paying job where I had an okay salary and like insurance and a steady schedule, there were a few like friends and acquaintances I had who literally would either tell me or who I overheard in other discussions saying like, oh, why does Tom get to like not have to do anything on the weekends? Why does he get to have like a vacation? Why does Tom get to, whatever? I don't know, if I bought like an iPhone or something, it'd be like, what does he get to do that? And it's like, well, because how for the last like many years, I've been like working really hard to go to school, and now this is the fruit of that labor. And you have not been doing, not only have you not been doing that, but you've not been doing anything. You haven't been building anything on your own. And now you live with your parents and you're broke. So like, I hope you see where I'm coming with this. It's just the idea that it is important to push yourself at times when you have a specific need to do that and you have a specific outcome, and you can be the one that defines what that is. But the reason this has been bothering me is I feel like it's been sort of easy to, if you're a creator now and there's this discussion about burnout and you're starting to feel just a little bit tired or a little bit stressed out or whatever it might be, as soon as you bring that up, the answer that the world gives you is like, take a break, take care of yourself, step away, do this, which could be what you need to do. It really could be. But it could also be exactly what you don't need to do. You're the only one who can tell. And I do just want to offer the idea that like it is important to push yourself. It doesn't mean you have to be hustle culture bro or hustle culture sister or whatever you want to call it. It just means that if you want to do something extraordinary, sometimes you have to put in an extraordinary amount of effort. And that was a line that I made on the couples table yesterday, and Heather laughed at me, but it's true. Like, if you want to make something new, if you want to make something that people care about, but you're not willing to put any effort into doing that, who else is going to care about it? Nobody. You don't want to kill yourself over it. You don't want to put yourself in a dangerous position, but you also don't want to sell yourself short. You don't want to cheat yourself of the opportunity, and you don't want to just, you don't want to just waste your time by not taking advantage of, the things that you have. And everybody's lives have different phases, right? It's not saying that you're going to work super hard and push yourself to the extreme forever, but maybe you have, as a teacher, for example, maybe you have like, hey, here's a few weeks in the summer break where I could really, really focus in on doing something and putting a lot of effort. So I'm going to be really exhausted for these few weeks. Maybe, maybe you have a work thing where you're finishing a big project and you have another big project coming up in a couple months, but in the meantime, you've got a little less on your plate at work, and now you can dive into a side project and really like push yourself to do better. Basically, the ultimate takeaway here is it is okay to push yourself, and I would encourage to do so if you're able to keep your gauge calibrated. That helps you know when you are hitting that point of exhaustion, burnout, unnecessary stress, danger, and you do need to take care of yourself and back off. But if the first thing you're feeling is just sort of like, well, this is kind of a little difficult, it's like, yeah, I mean, stuff that's worthwhile is often difficult, and if you want to get the benefits of doing the thing that's worthwhile, you kind of have to do something difficult. And I would just encourage you not to shy away from that or be scared of that or, go too much to the other side, because hustle culture was a totally bad thing. But I also think that in a similar fashion, going too far to the point of like anything that causes you discomfort of any kind whatsoever at any time is bad, is also harmful as well, just in a different way. And so you've got to decide for yourself what works, but it's something that's really, really important. And that's probably as much as I'll go into that today. Kind of curious, kind of nervous to put that opinion out there, to be honest with you, because it feels like it just feels sort of different from what we normally talk about. And it doesn't mean don't protect yourself, take breaks, take care of yourself. But it does mean like, sometimes you just do gotta sort of put in that extra effort and make the muscles sore while you're at the gym, right? I would love to know what you think about that. And if you have thoughts about that or about anything else that I've talked about today, because I feel like I also said a couple other things that people might have thoughts about, feel free to send a message or a video or an audio clip to tom@enthusiasmproject.com, and I can include you in a future episode. I typically record this show on Fridays. Sometimes it's Saturday or Sunday, but it's typically Fridays. So I'm telling you that if you're listening to this when the episode comes out and you want to send something in for a future one, you kind of know like, hey, maybe I should send that to him before Friday, because then it could be in the more recent episode. But I do really appreciate your time to listen. I'd love to know your thoughts. I appreciate all the kind messages, all the awesome support, and I appreciate you just, spending your time with me. The most valuable gift of all, right, is time. And I hope you have a safe, happy, healthy, fun rest of your week, and I'll see you next time.